Well, hey everybody, this is Jackson Mumey, for those of you that don't know me. And for the past 25 years, I've been successfully preparing students to take and pass their bar exams in California, Florida, Georgia, Texas, New York, and around the country with the Uniform Bar Exam and the Multi-State Bar Exam. You can find out more information about me and about Celebration Bar Review at our website at celebrationbarreview.com. But I'm with you today to talk about something that's really exciting to me. It's called photo reading for the bar exam. We're going to talk about photo reading, what it is, how it works, why you should consider it for the bar exam, why I think it's so important, and why it's a great tool to help you pass. Now, using photo reading for the bar exam, at Celebration Bar Review, we've seen increases in multi-state scores of more than 40 scale points. That's right, 40. We've also seen students increase their bar exam scores by upwards of 60 scale points overall, and hundreds of applicants move from repeated failure to the pass list. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. Check out our case studies page on our website, and you'll see nearly 100 video interviews of students explaining their success on the bar exam, and you'll find out that nearly all of them used photo reading for the bar exam. I began teaching and using photo reading more than a decade ago. In my search for ways to improve results for students who simply could not pass the bar after multiple attempts, I looked to the human potential movement for assistance. There I found authors and thinkers, people like Tony Robbins, Jack Canfield, Lisa Nichols, many others, but I also found a man named Paul Sheely. Paul had created a program called Photo Reading, and I was intrigued by it. So I purchased the course for my own use, and I began learning his system. To my surprise, it was incredibly powerful, it seemed to work very well, and it didn't require a great deal of effort. I slowly and quietly began to offer this resource to some of my toughest bar students, the ones who had repeatedly failed their exams, in the hopes that it might create improvement. What we discovered was not just an improvement, it was actually a breakthrough. Scores increased dramatically in all parts of their exams, and within a couple of years, those students, now members of the bar, were telling their friends to ask me about my, quote, secret weapon. Spurred by more and more requests, I wanted to expand, and I reached out to Paul and his team at Learning Strategies, and with their encouragement and assistance over time, I became a certified photo reading instructor, and frankly, the only one in the bar review field. I worked personally with Paul in a number of seminars on education and learning strategies, and I have now taught thousands of people how to photo read for the bar exam in live classes and online courses. My videos, webinars, live boot camps have become must-watch or must-attend events, and our bar pass rates have consistently astounded the bar review world. Hopefully I've raised your interest just a bit. So let's take a few minutes to go deeper into this phenomenon called photo reading. What is it? What the heck? Photo reading, that sounds kind of weird, isn't it? Is it speed reading? Is it photographic memory? And the answer to both of those questions would be no, it's not. First, this is not speed reading. This is not a speed reading course where you're literally trying to move your eye down the page faster and faster, because that's really difficult. What we're going to be talking about is something that's actually fairly easy to do. So photo reading is not speed reading. Is photo reading a photographic memory? No, it's not. And I think it's a weird name for the product because it implies that, but it's really not. So what is photo reading? It's what's called a whole mind reading system. It's a program that's designed to take advantage of the skills that you already possess as a reader and as a learner, and to bring the power of your whole brain, not just the small part that we think of as the conscious brain. I'll talk more about that distinction in a moment. But it's the ability to take the power of your non-conscious brain and put it to work for you. And it's like supercharging everything that you've done. Now, this is not something just for the bar exam. You could and should use it in virtually any setting. And in fact, most photo readers tend to find themselves over time using it at work, for their pleasure reading, for reading online, and it is amazingly effective. Now, this is not a gimmick. It's not crazy. It's not weird science. Photo reading actually started in 1985. As I said, it was created by Paul Sheely, who has his PhD in neurolinguistic programming and human psychology. Paul is one of the founders of a company called Learning Strategies. And back in 1985, he was doing work on how people were learning and how they were studying when he was approached by American Express, IDS, as a consultant. And they said to him, look, we're having a problem with our employees reading too slowly and comprehending too little. What do you think you could do that might resolve that problem? And Paul had been working on his own, both as a speed reader and trying to just improve his own reading skills. And he continued to bounce up against the thing that I think many of you find, and that is that reading goes slowly. It's painful, and comprehension seems to be low. I'll talk about some actual statistics about reading speed and comprehension in a moment, but for most people, it's really bad numbers both ways. They read slowly, and they don't remember very much of what they read. So it tends to make even the people that like to read gun-shy and apprehensive. So Paul started working on the basis of some studies that he had read and was working with about how people process information in their non-conscious brains, which is considerably stronger, in fact, by a factor of hundreds than our conscious brain. And he wondered, how could we employ what we already had without having to make this incredibly complicated and difficult? So, as I said, in 1985, Paul began teaching the first iteration of photo reading to these employees at American Express. And lo and behold, it worked really well, and photo reading took off. And Paul and his partners put together the photo reading course, basically the one that we employ in the bar review today, the core of the course. And they shortened it down from hundreds of hours of pages of work to a 7-hour training program, essentially 7 one-hour training courses in audio form. Now, this program is amazing and completely effective, as many of our students can attest to, and I've been through myself. In any event, what Paul and his team discovered was that there was a different way to read material in which you could retain the information. When you think about it, isn't that really the point of reading? Isn't it to be able to remember information? And certainly for the bar exam, that is absolutely the case. If you're reading to be able to understand concepts and to be able to answer questions, that's a very different kind of reading, and it's important that you get the material right and that you understand what the information is. The problem is that from the earliest days of our schooling, most of us were taught a very different way of reading. We were taught this one word at a time conscious reading style, but the reality is that's not very effective. So when you move away from that style to something that takes in a whole page at one moment and puts it into your non-conscious brain and then gives you a methodology to retrieve that information, wow, it's powerful. It's amazingly powerful. In essence, what's going to happen when you become a photo reader is that you're going to use your imagination and your intuition. Let me say that again. You're going to use your imagination and your intuition. And by using those two built-in innate skills and qualities that we all have, you're going to receive a fuller, more complete picture of the material that you've read. And here's the great benefit. You're going to be able to do that in a fraction, and I mean a fraction of the time that it used to take you, and with higher comprehension. Now, one of the great things to me about photo reading is that it's something that's already available to you innately. In other words, we're going to provide you a course, but this course is really built around a set of skills that you already have within you. It's not something that you have to pour into. In other words, we don't have to take the reading and pour it into you and teach you something. In fact, what we're going to do is teach you how to use the skills that you're equipped with from birth. And that's pretty remarkable when you think about it. If this is something that you used from birth, then it's just a matter of learning how to flex that muscle to make better use of it. And I think that's an important distinction. One of the ways that I like to think about it, and Paul also uses this analogy, he says that the brain, our human brains, are not empty buckets, but they're searchlights. Now, I think what he means by that is that when we do traditional reading, word for word, line for line, with your highlighter, you're underlining and taking linear notes, you're essentially acting like your brain is empty and you have to pour stuff into it. It's this empty bucket that's got to be filled up. And when you get it filled up high enough, you hope it doesn't slosh out or that there are holes in the bucket and you lose the water, and then you carry it over from the well and you try and pour it out onto the test, right? Isn't that what most people do? But this different approach says, wait a minute, treat your brain like a searchlight. Act like the information is already there. And then all you have to do is to move the light to find the information that you need at the time you need it, in the place that you need it. Fundamentally, if you can get that change in the paradigm, you begin to understand what photo reading can do for you. For the moment, forget about the mechanics of how it's done, but just conceptually recognize that if you're not trying to fill up your brain with new information, but literally taking what you know. So instead of an empty bucket, but Niagara Falls already in your brain, and searching for that information, you're going to be extremely effective in the reading and the work that you do on the basis of that reading. There's some interesting numbers that come from a wide variety of studies that I want to share with you. The average American reader today, finished with high school and into college, reads at a speed of 220 words per minute with 65% or lower comprehension. That's the average. Some people a little faster, some slower, but 220 words a minute, 65% comprehension. And you might say, I can live with that, it's okay. But this was an interesting study. There were two groups of professional people that actually scored way below those numbers. Care to take a guess? Yeah. Lawyers were one of them and doctors were the other. In fact, lawyers and doctors actually read less than 50% of that speed. Their average speeds were more like 110 words per minute, but their comprehension was even lower than 65%. Why? It's complicated material, and because you're sifting for all these details, you're working all of this detailed reading in. And so one of the primary groups that embraced and went to photo reading early on were lawyers and doctors, because 220 words a minute isn't fast enough for all the work that most of them have to do. And certainly 110 words a minute with 65% comprehension isn't going to do the job. Now, I'm going to make a fairly remarkable claim to you, so sit tight. With photo reading, you will be able to read, if you're ready, 68,000 words per minute. That's right, 68,000 words per minute with 74% comprehension. That's the average across the board in studies we've done with our bar review students for now more than a decade. 68,000 words per minute with 74% comprehension. Really? Why would you choose, even if you're a great reader, 220 words a minute and 64% comprehension, or 68,000 words a minute and 74% comprehension? Are you kidding me? It's pretty interesting, isn't it? So as you see, photo reading represents a bold step, though not a new one, but a bold step in what we would describe as a provocative new direction in learning and education. And the reason that I say that it's provocative is because most of what happens in legal education, and certainly in the bar exam, is really repetition, the tried and true, even when it doesn't work. You've heard many times, and I've said it, that people study as though they're taking Abraham Lincoln's bar exam. They study the same way he did. They might as well be studying by the old fire crackling in the hearth. They read slowly, they try to memorize, they try to recite information, but it's a very unproductive way of working. And the national statistics bear that out. Most people fail the bar exam on their first try. But the reality is that the way we now know how to read and learn and understand actually changes all of those numbers dramatically. And photo readers do exceedingly well because they're able to process much more information and to make better use of it. Now, is it revolutionary? No, I would say it's evolutionary. It's the next step in the way you read and comprehend and focus and use what you've learned. And so everything that you've learned up to this point is simply a stepping stone to be able to photo read. If you know how to read, you actually know how to photo read. Now, let me pause here for a moment to address some of the objections I hear about taking photo reading for the bar exam. Sometimes people say, I'm not an English speaker, it's not my first language. That's fine. Photo reading will work for you just as well. In fact, in many cases, I've seen it work better for foreign trained attorneys because we skip past all the conscious effort to translate words from your native language into English and back. And that's an interesting reality. Another thing I hear from some people are those who say they have learning disabilities, things like dyslexia, ADHD, or some other cognitive processing challenge. Photo reading is actually perfect for you. We simply bypass the conscious neural pathways. Those are the ones that give you trouble, and we go straight to the non-conscious. It's like taking a highway detour onto a totally uncluttered brand new superhighway. It's a perfect workaround if you have any learning disability, and we've seen great improvement for people in those situations. I also sometimes hear from people who are concerned about their eyesight. As you can tell, I wear glasses and I'm nearly blind without them. But we've had successful photo readers with all kinds of macular difficulties, including total loss of sight in one eye. It apparently doesn't impact their photo reading at all, and I'll explain why in just a moment. In other words, no matter what the challenge, I've become more and more convinced with every passing bar exam, as I see the overall numbers across the country go down, that photo reading is actually the key to being successful. And this is particularly true for repeat bar takers. If you watch our interviews with some of those folks on our webpage, you will notice a common theme. They used photo reading for the bar exam, and it worked. And this is from people of all ages, all backgrounds, all countries. The reason it works is because it takes advantage of what you already have within you. It takes advantage of what you've already got innately. It's not something we have to put into you, but it's something that you already have. So let's dive in a bit deeper on that. Now, there are two resources I want to point out to you that you already have. The first is your non-conscious mind. We've talked about that. In school, the way that we learned, typically whether it was law school or all the way back to preschool, but essentially the same methodology was what was called reflective consciousness. And reflective consciousness really can be categorized this way. You read, you remember, you regurgitate, right? That's what it was all about, wasn't it? Isn't that what you did in grammar school, in middle school, in high school, in college, and then in law school? You read, you remember, you regurgitate. In education, we call that reflective consciousness. And that is the traditional American style of teaching in most places. But what's really painful about that is that those of you who have children, or like in my case, even now grandchildren, and you watch how those children learn, particularly young ones, what they actually do is exactly the opposite of reflective consciousness. They learn with all of their senses instead. They have this very wide funnel, and they take all of this information in and then they work through it, rather than this narrow one step at a time approach. Unfortunately, school reverses that funnel for most of our children. It takes the wide funnel, it inverts it, and it starts with a really narrow funnel. And so what happens is we teach children to read one word at a time. It's very painful to watch. And so we take this natural love of learning that children have, and we break it down and reduce it to fit into this idea of reflective consciousness. Now, when we switch to photo reading, what we're doing is engaging the non-conscious brain. And by non-conscious brain, I mean everything that's not in your prefrontal cortex. It's the conscious mind. In the non-conscious brain, we engage all of the parts of our brain in this process called photo reading. Now, there's something called the Lyman standard, or the threshold in the brain. It's the threshold between the active brain and the non-conscious brain, or the conscious and non-conscious. Photo reading operates at the Lyman standard, right at the threshold or the connection point between your conscious and your unconscious brain. And so it takes advantage of what you consciously understand, but what you also unconsciously or non-consciously retain and have learned. And the net result is that you get access to a vastly greater amount of information. So that's the first resource. It takes advantage of your non-conscious mind. But you recall I said there were two resources. The second is what we call the preconscious processor. Now, I have to explain this just a little bit. Essentially, the way our brains work is that they filter out information that we don't need at any given moment, and they reroute you that information that you do need. That's what your brain was designed to do, mine too. It filters out all the extraneous, irrelevant stuff and keeps you focused on what you need. Apparently, our brains can distinguish stimuli, and to do that without engaging our conscious mind. So there's all sorts of things going on in the background all the time, but we only have a passing, if any, sense of it going on. It's just happening because our conscious brain is working on a very small platform relative to our non-conscious brain. When it comes to reading, this has particular application. Studies have shown that the non-conscious brain sees a word and processes it 0.25, a quarter of a second, before you have any conscious awareness of the word. In other words, our brain actually fools us or tricks us into thinking we're reading it. So we read a word on the screen or in a book and we think, now I've read that word. But in fact, we now know that your non-conscious brain has processed that word before the message ever got to your conscious brain. So it's already there before that. Now that's pretty amazing, because if you could take advantage of that skill, there must be something else there. And here's the way that the numbers work. And again, these are staggering numbers, but consistent scientific studies and research and reports all say the same thing. Our eyes and brain can gather material or information 10 million bits per second. 10 million bits per second. Okay, that's pretty fast. But how much do we consciously perceive? You ready? Remember, we've got 10 million bits per second, but what we consciously perceive is only 40 bits. Not 40 million, 40 bits per second. So we've got 10 million bits that we bring in, but we only consciously perceive 40 bits. Now, another way to think about this is that if you were to put a circle around where you're standing right now, and that circle were, let's say, 12 inches in diameter, that would represent the conscious brain. It's the 40 bits that it's processing. But the radius of the circle of the non-conscious brain would be 11 miles in diameter. Pretty incredible, huh? Now, to get beyond the need to control it all consciously is what photo reading enables you to do. In other words, and I won't sing it, but you got to let it go, let it go. You have to let go of the desire to know everything one word at a time. Photo reading is not satisfactory and satisfying to the conscious brain. But when you let go of that need to know everything, and you do that, what happens is you now begin to take advantage of the non-conscious processing instead of this very tiny conscious processing. That's a huge change for a bar taker, because a bar student typically will come to me and say, I've got to know it all. I've got to learn it all. I've got to read everything. I've got to memorize everything. Or I can't possibly read as fast as you want me to because I've got to understand it all. And here's the irony. The slower you go, the less you remember. Study after study confirms that across all categories and disciplines. You see, the old paradigm was that you had to read to fill up your brain. You had to put information into the brain. But the new paradigm with photo reading is that you ask yourself, how could this information serve me? That's easy for us in the bar exam. What you say is, how can this information help me answer a question, an essay question or a multi-state question? How can it help me inform my understanding of the law, or help me recognize how to write an argument or how to be persuasive? How does this information help me? When you can identify how it will help you accomplish your goal to pass the bar exam, suddenly you have access to a vast resource that up until now was there, but you never did anything with it, did you? Students sometimes say to me, is it hard to learn how to photo read? In fact, they say that to me all the time. And I say, no, it's like watching a movie. It's actually pretty simple. It's only hard when people try to make it hard. And of course, if there's any group in the world that's good at making things hard, it would probably be bar takers. But the reality is that learning how to photo read for the bar exam is actually quite simple. It's taught through 7 one-hour lessons that are part of the course and then enhanced with other materials that we provide. The reality of this is that you can actually learn photo reading in just a few minutes. I teach it in a live seminar in one morning. It's not very difficult. The reality of photo reading is that any information can be consumed this way. Now, some people ask, does it work only with printed books? No, you can use it on printed books, but you can also use it on online digital books. That's my preferred method of photo reading. You can use it for magazines or newspapers, remember those? You can use it for any source of visual stimuli. Whatever it is, it'll work. And I think this is really wonderful, because what it means is you don't have to have a set of printed books to make photo reading work. It's not speed reading where you have to have a printed book. So that's something else to keep in mind. What we're doing when we photo read is we're tapping into the genius that's already in you. And some of you I know are thinking, oh, I don't want to hear about the genius in me. That's just psychobabble BS. Okay, I respect that. But here's the reality. You're pretty smart to have gotten through law school and to be in a position to take the bar exam. By many standards, you would be considered a genius. Now, maybe you weren't the genius in your law school class, but relative to the world, you're pretty smart. And I'm saying there's even more genius in you, and it's relatively easy to tap into that. But for those of you that are in that mode of, you can't tell me anything, I know it all, okay, you win, right? But I imagine you've already dropped off of this video. But for those of you that are willing to be taught, that are willing to let that inner genius come out, it can be a game changer. And at the end of the day, isn't that really the point? You want to pass the bar? Okay, here's how you do it. People say to me all the time, what do I have to do to pass the bar? My first answer is, I think you've got to be a photo reader. It really makes a difference. I've seen it too many times to know anything differently than that. When you're photo reading, what's going to happen is that you'll be able to get through an extraordinary amount of material in much less time, and that creates for far more repetition. Let me quantify that for you. Typically, if you take one of our subject outlines for, let's say, a typical multi-state subject, it runs about 150 pages in a printed book. And if you're reading it traditionally, one word at a time, it would not be uncommon to expect it to take you 10 to 15 hours to read those 150 pages. In fact, I have many students that go far beyond 15 hours. The interesting thing is that if we then test their comprehension at that point, comprehension is far less than 65% for those slow readers. In fact, in our studies, it's under 50%. So it's a very inefficient way to read. Now, what we do in our traditional course is that we don't have you read that way. We don't want you to spend more than 15 hours. So we ask you to skim the material. It's sort of the poor man's photo reading, if you will. And when we have you skim it in 3 hours instead of 10 or 15 hours, we actually see comprehension moving up, although still not reaching quite that 65% level. So you can skim and get the material that way. What if you photo read? If you photo read, you should be able to do the same 150 pages in about 15 minutes, and your comprehension will be over 70%. That's something to think about, isn't it? The other part of this is, as I said, the people are sort of resistant to the kind of flat earth society folks that are out there. But here's what I discovered. If you wanted to get a different result, if you want to reach something new, you've really got to do something new. And I think for the people that just keep trying to read and study, to make flashcards and do mnemonics and memorize the way they've always read and studied, they're dooming themselves to pretty much the same results over and over again. And while there are things we can do to help to try and move that needle, there is no faster, better, more efficient way to change results than by using a tool like photo reading, because it gives you an entirely new approach to all of the material. So how does photo reading work? What are the logistics? As I said, it's pretty simple. I'm just going to briefly outline it. There are only 5 steps, and they are provided in the course that comes from Learning Strategies that's made available to our students when they order. There are 5 steps that you learn to do. You learn how to prepare before doing the reading, and that takes about a minute in real time. And when you're doing it, you'll need about a minute in the preparation stage. Then you're going to preview the material, which is before you read it, and that's really just asking, what do I want to know out of this material? What are my questions? If I were sitting down with the author, which I guess in this case would be me, all right, what do I want Jackson to tell me about this material? And you're going to take a few minutes, 5 or 6 on average, to preview 150 pages of material. And then you're actually going to photo read, literally flipping the pages. This is looking at the entire 4 corners of the page, if it's a printed page, looking at the middle of the page as if you were taking a picture with your eyes. So click, click, click. You don't blink each time, but you're really doing what's called a blip page. It's just a soft focus. And you're literally turning page after page, either digitally or manually, saying to yourself, relax, 1, 2, 3, 4, turn the page. It's literally what you're doing. And you're going through all the pages just that way. So going through 150 pages at a particularly slow pace will take you 10 minutes or less to do the photo reading, the physical 3rd step. Sometimes people stop at this stage and they'll say, I photo read it, but I don't remember anything. And that's right. It's not putting it into any kind of photographic memory in your brain. Most of us don't have photographic recall. What you're doing, as I said, is putting it into your non-conscious brain at the Lyman threshold. And that's where the next 2 steps become important, because all of that material is now in your head. And here's the weird part. You could actually photo read the material upside down and backwards, but because of the way our brains process information, it would still be there. Now, I've done this. I've done it with our students, and it's mind-blowing, but it's reality. It doesn't matter how you do it. But in any event, that photo reading happens, and it takes 10 minutes or less. All right, 2 steps remain. The 4th step is what we call a post view. This is when you literally go in after having photo read. Maybe you've even slept on the material overnight. You let the material process, sort of like doing a backup in your brain. And now you go back to the material and you start asking specific questions. For example, what do I want to know about the rule against perpetuities, or the hearsay exceptions, or the First Amendment and freedom of speech? And as you begin to ask those questions, you'll find yourself identifying particular information in the text that's valuable to you. You're going to add that to something called a mind map. I'll talk about that more in a moment. It's a relatively short process, in some cases 10 to 15 minutes, just to do some general post viewing. And then the last and critical step in photo reading is to activate what you've read. You start using the material to figure out what's important to you. Now, here's where it gets super cool. I know, super cool. How old am I? When we started creating the Bar Review, I didn't know about photo reading, but I was working in one of the more exciting educational environments in the country at the time, called the Celebration School. I've told this story before, but at Celebration School, which was a joint venture of the Walt Disney Corporation, the Harvard School of Education, Johns Hopkins, the MacArthur Foundation, a number of other prominent universities and educational thought leaders, we were using best practices to discover ways that students learned everything from kindergarten through adults, different from the traditional funnel that I described to you earlier. And we were working, unbeknownst to us, on the same paradigm that photo reading was being built on, but we didn't know about photo reading. I didn't specifically know about it at the time, but we were doing the same kind of work. So when I started Celebration Bar Review in 1995, I wanted to create a concept in which people would skim their reading because I didn't know about photo reading. But I did know that I wanted them to do a fast read and then to activate what they had read through lectures and question practice review, which would be done in small increments over a period of time to provide for more spaced repetition, the best practice. Well, it was very powerful and very effective. And then, as I said, I found out about photo reading. And I was like the cartoon character whose eyes go boing, boing, they pop out of their head. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my gosh, here's a process that will work for people. And I've already got the activation step built into the course. So if you are a photo reader in our bar review course, here's what happens. You photo read a particular piece of information, an outline, and then you go through those first 4 steps that I just discussed: preparing, previewing, photo reading, and post viewing. But then I take over in the bar review part and I activate that material in the same way through lecture, through question practice, and through the creation of mind maps. Now, activation is nothing other than what it sounds like. We're taking what you've learned back in your non-conscious brain and we're making those neurons fire. We're helping activate it for you. It's called intentional activation. On the bar exam, it'll happen spontaneously through the questions. And suddenly what you begin to discover is that you know the answers to the questions. You don't know why you know them, you just know them. You know how to write the law when you're writing an essay, you just know how to do it. It comes from the activation process that we're doing, and it coordinates and works together with photo reading to make it valuable. And that's the beauty of putting photo reading together with our bar review course in the photo reading for the bar exam system, because we keep going from there. Now, one tool that I just briefly mentioned but haven't discussed in detail is called a mind map. If you're not familiar with mind maps, these are visual representations of information, often drawn out like the branches of a tree. We use mind maps to help activate what you've just photo read and to expand your understanding of the relationships within the material. Mind maps are a different note-taking system than the traditional linear form of notes and far more powerful. And when combined with photo reading, the results are very impressive. Now, some people have said, well, why couldn't I just get photo reading and do it on my own? You could, and it would definitely help you. But without our activation methods and tools, without our mind maps and our lectures in a video format, and in that video, you're going to actually be able to see the words as you're listening, so it's even more activation, and question practice, and putting all that together in a special syllabus for you, you lose a big part of getting what you've photo read to work. Now, conversely, can you just take our course and not photo read? Sure you can. But if you photo read, you're putting a lot more information into the pipeline to activate, and therefore it's more effective. So that's the essence of what we're doing. We're taking this information that you're photo reading, putting it into your non-conscious brain, and then you're using that in your pre-conscious processor, and you're bringing it to the test in every way that you need. Now, you can take advantage of photo reading for the bar exam for only $395. You can even break it up into 2 payments, and you'll add it to your bar review, and we'll integrate it into your studies. We'll create a study plan that uses photo reading, and I'll teach and work with you. The photo reading course from Dr. Sheely will be a digital download that you can put on any device that you own and take advantage of it and use it anytime, forever. It doesn't go away. I think you're going to love it. It's a great resource for you. And we'll add some extras to that. We have a free webinar that details how to use photo reading for the bar exam. It's part of a live class I co-taught with one of the leading photo reading instructors in the world, Millicent St. Clair. It lasts a little over an hour, and it'll be part of your personal library. You'll also receive a second webinar on mind maps for the bar exam. It's filled with examples and how-to steps. It's an invaluable tool added to your permanent library. And you'll also receive a free 15-minute bonus Zoom video coaching call with me to discuss your photo reading progress and to make sure you're on track. And finally, you'll receive a special photo reading for the bar exam syllabus that will detail your entire bar study process as a photo reader. And if you want, you can add on optional webinars that we've done for photo reading and essay writing, photo reading and performance tests, photo reading and multiple choice test taking. It's all there for you. So I really encourage you to check out photo reading. If you're in our course and you haven't used it, please check it out. If you're not in our course yet, take a look at photo reading and then look at our course. And I think you'll see that they work together in combination. And I encourage you to take advantage of all of those tools and resources. I hope that you're intrigued with this idea of photo reading. Maybe it's making you wonder what could really happen in your life and how you could make it work. I'll tell you that it's a game changer. It's a change in your future and in your life, but it can change the lives of your family members, your children, and the people that you work with. And I really hope that you give it serious consideration. And then I look forward to seeing your name on the pass list and to see you as another one of our successful photo readers. Thanks for being with me today. Bye-bye.